Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss some of the questionable decisions that have been made in the name of policing in order to enforce the new emergency regulations and consider whether or not the police might have a point in certain cases, coping with a very difficult job without much training at the moment, but also to consider if there should be further clarification as well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the first thing, before I show you a tweet I want to go through in particular, it's important to remember that we're in a very difficult situation. The police, who are understaffed, massively understaffed, far fewer police in the UK than there are in comparable nations in Europe, and they are being asked to effectively police an almost total lockdown of the country. It's not a total lockdown of the country. People from other countries like France and Italy and Spain are pointing out just how loose ours is, but it is still, compared to normal life, a bit of a lockdown. And it is difficult, and I think we do need to cut them some slack, but at the same time there have been some bizarre decisions from individual police officers in terms of how to enforce these, and it may be individual police constables, or it may be, you know, more senior officers that are providing that direction for their officers. Now, I want to just point out a tweet from Warrington Police here. Now, there's a few things about this. First of all, and this is what has got some legal commentators scratching their head. It says here, overnight, 6 people have been summoned for offences relating to the new coronavirus legislation to protect the public. Now, before we go over the 3 offences, so to speak, this is curious because what was supposed to be happening, if people were out of their home without a reasonable excuse, the procedure is supposed to be a £60 fixed penalty notice, and if it's like a second or offence or so on, it actually ramps up quite a lot. It can get to be a very, very expensive fine. In other words, if you get clobbered with it once, for some people, we're like, all right, then. And if you get clobbered, it's not worth getting clobbered a second time. So that is strange. Summons for offences means being prosecuted, which means if found guilty, having a criminal record. Now, not only have various legal commentators pointed to the fact that actually this isn't what you're supposed to be doing, they're also pointing out that actually the legal system is already, I mean, much like the NHS, but much less reported. It was already at breaking point before this crisis. The fact that legal proceedings are more difficult to take place now because a lot of that has to be done remotely. To begin with, they were cramming people into court still, and that's stopped now, thankfully. So this is just adding more strain to that system. So that is curious, that's curious. But let's go through some of these as well. Now, it says out for a drive due to boredom. Now, I'm going to try and come at this from both sides, and then you throw in the comments what your thoughts are. But please listen to what I think of the both sides first of all. So the first thing first, in terms of why the police shouldn't be enforcing this, you could argue if a person or a group of people are in the household anyway, because they're getting cabin fever, they decide to just go for a drive. They get into their metal box and they go for a drive. They don't get off anywhere. They're not going anywhere. There's no destination. They just go for a drive out of town and back into town. They're not making contact with anyone else. And they're coming back into the home. There is no chance of them spreading the virus if they have it to other people. And there is no chance of them contracting it from other people either. In which case, they shouldn't really be having an issue with that, because this new legislation is, as legal commentators have pointed out, is Public Health Act legislation, not Public Order Act legislation. So it shouldn't be used by police to maintain public order, only to maintain public health. There isn't a health issue directly, so why would you do it? That's on the don't be silly plod argument. Now, there is potentially another argument. I haven't actually heard Warrington Police's argument, but I can just imagine myself. So the way I would look at it, if I was trying to think of a way of saying, no, you shouldn't do that, this is what I would say. There's 3 things potentially you could say. One of which is, well, first of all, the regulations, when it gives the reasons, the reasonable excuses for leaving your home, this is not one of them. So there is that. The second one is, if you are driving out and about, there is a chance, however unlikely, and it's much more unlikely these days because there are fewer vehicles on the road, but there is a chance that you will be involved in a road traffic incident. In which case, not only are the police going to need to be involved, But if there's an injury, also the NHS, you're putting load on the NHS. And I will have to say this, do not carry out any activities that are unnecessary, where there is some chance that you could get an injury and need to go to hospital and not only are you going to a place where it's basically a hotbed of virus spreading anyway, because there's no routine testing in hospitals, but also you put in that extra load on the NHS. So that would be one possible reason there. The other one is by going out for a drive, a long drive, an hour drive, stuff like that. You say, well, you've no chance of passing it on, no chance of contracting it. And the chance of a road traffic incident is low. Is lower, in fact, than at other times. There is still the possibility you're using your fuel, which means that you are going to need to fill up more often, which means more frequent trips to the petrol station, stuff like that. So you may or may not buy those. I would look at it and think there might be a reason for saying no to that. At the same time, you could also argue if these people really feel the need to get out and go for a drive, although it may come to blows in the household because they're going stir crazy, there's an issue there. That is one where I would definitely say there needs to be clarification. It has also been pointed out that when the question was asked of Michael Gove, senior minister, senior member of the government, are police going to pull people over just for going a drive? He said, I can't see police pulling people over just for going for a drive. So a minister has said that police probably won't be doing this. He hasn't said they shouldn't be doing it as such, but probably wouldn't be doing it, and yet they are doing it. There needs to be clarification, I would say. But I can see both sides of that one. The next one is returning from parties. Now, the act of going to a party, going to someone else, a group of people, going to someone's house where there's other people as well, is a definite no-no. So anything related to that is a definite no-no. I mean, if you go from... So the issue here, I think, is the summons rather than the fixed penalty notice. And then the final one, which I think is a definite, don't be silly. Multiple people from the same household go into the shops for non-essential items. Now, there's two parts of this. The multiple people, I would certainly argue if someone needs to go out and get some things, it probably should be one person, not multiple people. If you've got multiple people going around the shop, yes, they are not going to pass it between themselves, because if they were, they're going to do it in the household anyway. But you're a larger group going around the shops, making it more difficult for other people to distance themselves socially from you. Let's not do that. But then it says, go into the shops for non-essential items. It doesn't specifically say in the regulations you can't do that. Granted, one of the exceptions for going is to go to the shops for essential items. But the other problem is what is an essential item and what is not an essential item can be. At the end of the day, certain shops are allowed to be open and some are not. If a shop is allowed to be open, then by extension, you have to suggest that the items they sell. And yes, there are shops that would sell food and sell other things as well, and the other things aren't really essential. But it's so subjective, you shouldn't really be having a pop at that. At the end of the day, you can't... If people are going out to shop for it, they consider it essential for some purpose. Just because you don't doesn't mean it's not. At the end of the day, anything we buy, we consider essential, don't we? Because we're spending money on it. So that one is a bit dodgy, particularly when there have been reports, for example, of police telling shopkeepers that Easter eggs are not essential and they shouldn't really be selling them. That is definitely overstepping it. We've had a few other bizarre ones as well. We've had, it was reported at the weekend, a police officer stopping a shopkeeper. They were drawing on the pavement outside their shop with chalk lines, which of course will wash away, 2 metre lines so that people could queue outside the shop, distanced apart. And not only did the police officer take umbrage to this, they tried to write out a ticket, a fixed penalty notice for this. That, I gather, was cleared up later on and the police officer told, don't be stupid. But to be fair, there are going to be these situations where the police, without a great deal of time to come to grips with this, without a lot of clarifications from ministers, bear in mind a lot of this stuff as well hasn't actually been passed as such by Parliament. Parliament didn't scrutinise these measures or vote on them. They just went through on the nod. No debates about them at all. So there's going to be a lot of cases where the police are going to have to use their initiative. And it's to be hoped in a lot of cases they'll use their initiative in the interest of public safety and the general health emergency. But there is always the possibility that a police officer, without malicious intent, is going to prefer that people just stayed in the houses and just go, do you know what, I'm going to try and use these however I can to keep people inside, because that's what's going to beat the virus. The problem is what they're not necessarily considering is by doing this, you're going to create much more unrest, because this is for an extended period of time. And as police leaders were saying just last week, at the end of the day, police need to work with the community on this, because they do not have the numbers to actually lock us down. We're not a police state. We don't even have the numbers of a normal democracy. We certainly don't have the numbers to properly clamp down on society. And as people have been pointing out, if the police apply these regulations in a way that seems arbitrary, they will not get the public on their side. Without the public on their side, they cannot hope to police it at all. So everything that they do needs to be explained properly. It needs to be clear. And it needs to be clear how they are using these regulations to prevent the spread of the virus, as opposed to using them for public order situations, which is totally different and totally, unnecessary. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.